Hi, everyone, and welcome to the November 12th, 2024 Higher Education Tableau User Group meeting. I hope you enjoyed DJ HETUG's TV theme song collection. It was just a little sneak preview of what we're going to be getting into today. We're going to start with our announcements, and then we're going to have a Meet a Community challenge instead of Meet a Community member. And the challenge would be Data Plus TV. Now you get the theme song tie-in. We're going to follow that up with tips and tricks with Andrew Drinkwater, who's going to show us how to button down parameters, and wrap it up with financial aid, the other F word, a case study in reporting financial aid and scholarship by Alison Joseph and Carl Cortright from Western Carolina. And then we'll have our traditional wrap up and chat in breakout rooms. So before we get started, does anyone have any announcements? You can come off mute. You can share it in the chat if you have job announcements or anything that you think would be of interest to the group. All right, doesn't sound like there are any takers today. So we'll just jump right in. We're going to talk about our Data Plus TV challenge. Now, you might have heard about this because it's been going around the Tableau social media platforms. So Data Plus TV is a community challenge where they've put together this fabulous data set from IMDb of all of these television shows. And they want you to download the Discovery Kit and get your hands dirty making a dashboard about your favorite TV shows. It has a starter guide and everything to kind of help you get your feet wet, explain the data set, and get busy visiting. So there are already a lot of Data Plus TV dashboards available out there on the Tableau public site. This is just a handful of examples. See, there are so many different things you could visit about your favorite shows, your favorite actors and actresses, game shows, Saturday Night Live. There's so many. You can't even list them all. So definitely get in there and see what inspires you and what you can come up with. And to kind of help get you started, get you inspired, we have devised a little game that we're going to play. And Roshni is going to be our game show host.
At least in theory, I am. This whole like sharing screens thing, it's hard, man. All right, here we go. You guys should see a screen.
Yes.
It should have a QR code in the corner.
It does.
Excellent. And if you don't want to scan the QR code, if you just go to menti.com, which I am putting in the chat right now, typing very slowly, and then put in the code 71598775, which I'm also pasting into the chat. You can join our Data Plus TV trivia. I'm stealing a little bit from the San Diego tag. This event is stars HETUG. It's directed by HETUG, produced by HETUG, just like television shows, and copyright 2024 HETUGs, although HETUG Productions doesn't actually exist, so so I have no idea what this looks like for you guys, other than what I'm seeing on the screen.
It looks like this.
Oh, awesome. So I'm gonna wait until I have no idea how many people have actually joined already. So I'm just gonna wait until that like thumbs up number goes to like 50 or something. Maybe that shows how many people have signed in. Was everyone prompted to put in their name or anything like that?
No.
Oh, well, crap, we did this wrong. Okay.
We'll figure it out.
We hopefully will. Let's see, what does this do? Sorry, this is the first time that we have show joining instructions. Oh no, that's what we want there. This is the first time we have used this in HETUG. So there should be away shortly. Oh, look, we hit 50. Oh, over 50. If you haven't already joined, do so now. We're just gonna keep this banter going, this one-sided banter going for a little while. If you're paying attention to the music, there were some hints-ish in the music that will help you during, well, they probably won't but let's say they might help you during Data Plus TV trivia. A lot of this was some of my favorite shows and other random pieces of information that just live in my brain that shouldn't be there because they're taking up a valuable space that could be used for real things, but you know, I heart TV. So, all right, let's see what happens when I click this button. Oh, look, we are, oh, okay. So have you guys been asked to enter names here?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Phew. Totally worried. So the top five winners are going to get some Tableau swag. We will be in touch. Hopefully we'll actually be able to see your information. Um, so all right, I got my notes ready. Okay, we've got 84 players. Can we get to 100? Can we get to 100? Come on, guys. 85? Oh, all right. Apparently asking people does get more people to sign up. Should I wait till we get to 100? So what are some of the prizes that you might get? So in the running, some Tableau pens, perhaps some stickers,
Ooh, I love
uh,
stickers.
a little notepad. I can't remember. Oh, socks. Socks. How could I forget socks? I love socks.
Socks are the best.
And then a couple of other random things thrown in that are Tableau-ish that could help you in either your day-to-day lives or in your I'm getting groceries lives or in your I like wearing a bucket hat lives. We haven't quite figured out that last little chunk. Um, so all right, are we gonna get to 100?
Oh, we're
Come on,
so
there's
close.
four
Four
more
more
people.
people.
Oh, someone dropped out. Come on. All right. You can join late if you haven't already joined. You can join late, or at least that's what I set this up to do. We'll see if that actually works out in reality. Um,
7,
oh,
58.
so close, guys. Oh, is someone gonna push us over the 100? Yes. All right.
Woo!
Oh no, 99. Come on. The ups and downs of live TV. All right, we're gonna go ahead and enter the quiz. So I have no idea how much time I have before this first question, so this is again a learning experience. So DJ HETUG started off today's pre-meeting music with the theme song from Square Pegs, which starred Sarah Jessica Parker, who you may know from Sex and the City. I don't think I've ever watched Sex and the City, but that's what everyone knows her from. And Sex and the City was set in the city, in New York City. So, hold on. New York City is also the backdrop of all of the following TV shows, except and you should see some answers choices on your screen. Friends, Gossip Girl, Happy Days, or Succession. Tap the answer you think is not set in New York City.
I love these little floating thumbs.
Whoa, that was a massive bunch of floating thumbs. All right. Those of you who said Happy Days, that is the correct answer. Friends, Gossip Girl, and Succession were all set in New York City. Happy Days was set in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I'm gonna say it's Kenosha, but now I'm doubting. But I do remember when you wanted to see it live, went to Happy Days to see Fonzie ride his motorcycle over a bunch of trash cans. I want to say it was 13, and that was live from Kenosha, Wisconsin. So there we go. So let's next slide. Next slide. So where did I find the answer to this? This all came from the iconic TV show locations in New York City, Viz. Is on Tableau Public, and I'm going to throw that into the chat now. And you can hover over any of these dots. You can't do this in the screenshot clearly, but you can hover over any of the dots and see, oh, where was this location? Or what show was this location on? So thought this was a pretty cool viz. So we got here. Happy Days was the answer to the last question. Oh, wait, there's a leaderboard. So the top 10 folks on our leaderboard are Junam, Sean LaRoche. I'm only going to name for top 3 and Hola Hop, because there's a whole lot of names. And hopefully we'll be able to move or figure out who Vote Goat and Dr. Centipede and some of the others who have a fun name are down the line. All right, so we got here from Happy Days. So this next question is Happy Days related. So Richie, Fonzie, Chachi, and Moose, if you don't know who Moose is, you're not alone. We're all on Happy Days, but they were also on Arrested Development. So, oh, whoops. Let's try this again. Who jumped the shark on Happy Days? The potential answer choices are Ron Howard, who played Richie on Happy Days and played himself and the narrator on Arrested Development. Henry Winkler, who played Fonzie on Happy Days, but Barry Zuckerhorn on Arrested Development. Scott Baio, aka Chachi. Charles Chachi Arcola on Happy Days. Bob Blah Blah on Arrested Development. Or Clint Howard, who is Ron Howard's little brother, played Moose on Happy Days, but Johnny Bark on Arrested Development. The correct answer. That's right, folks. Fonzie jumped a shark on both shows. It was actually a pretty cool episode. It was season 2, episode 13. And technically we didn't find this information on this viz, but this viz is pretty damn cool. Lisa Trescott's Arrested Development by the Numbers viz. There's always data in the banana stand. If that makes no sense to you, you should go watch Arrested Development and then you will learn.
I'll also say Lisa has a great blog about how she built this viz. And she should put that link in the chat.
She should. And there's also been a couple of Data Plus TV events that she has talked about this viz at, including the San Diego TUG from last week, which the recording for that should be on the San Diego TUG user group page as well. So awesome. Let's go look at the leaderboard. Hey, I remembered in question 2 that there's a leaderboard. Feeling okay about this now? All right. So, question by question, we can see how the scoring moves. So Sean LaRoche has moved into the lead thanks to some fast fingers. All right, next question is about jumping the shark. So jumping the shark, if you haven't heard the term, is when a show does a stunt and then goes downhill. Although I will say that Happy Days was in its prime when they had their jump the shark moment, and actually stayed in its prime for a few seasons afterwards. And speaking of primes, which of these prime numbers is the number of live action series that spawned from Happy Days? 2, 3, 5, or 7? And we're talking live action series that spawned from Happy Days. And since most people have answered now, I'm just going to start naming them to see which ones I've forgotten or am remembering. So there's Laverne and Shirley, part that. There's Mork and Mindy. That's right, Mork was a guest star in an episode of Happy Days. We've got Blansky's Beauties. So we already know the answer is not 2. I've forgotten all the rest of them, which is funny because, as we will see, I'm the one who built the viz for this one. So overall, there are nine shows that spawned from Happy Days. A few of them were animated cartoons, if a cartoon can be anything but animated. I will at some point remember, but if you scroll through this, I think the second or third slide, if you hit these little buttons, you will see what the other shows were. Joni Loves Chachi. Yes, that's one that everyone wants to forget. I think Out of the Blue must be the last one then, which I have never seen, which is why it is very easy for me to forget it. But apparently, it was also had a little bit of a fantasy aspect to it. I don't really remember any of it. I've only read about it and been like, this sounds ridiculous, and it is. Anyway, so let's see what happened to the leaderboard here. We're
Well, I
seeing
think there
some.
have been upsets.
There was. Apparently, don't ask data people numbers. That's what we learned just now. So Coral and James E, you guys have moved up in the standings. All right. Nope. Woo. All right. Well, I pressed whatever button that was too many times. Next slide. This is the okay. All right. We did this already. Now we go to question 4. Okay. So a total of 9 series spun off of Happy Days. And speaking of the number 9, let's go back to Square Peds, which is where this whole thing started. So episode 9 featured the band Devo. Yes, the band with the red plastic hats, the Whip It Good band, that band. They were the band playing at Muffy's Bat Mitzvah, which, by the way, is the title of that episode. So which of the following TV shows has Devo not appeared in? So the answers are the Aquabats Super Show, Futurama, the Other F Word, and Rugrats. And you will know that 2 of these are animated. So, you know, we're including voice acting as Devo in the mix here. Oh, excellent. The Other F Word. I had never heard of this show. But apparently it's a show, which is kind of cool. But there's also the only reason I heard about this show is because there's also a movie called The Other F Word, which I believe should be in the Data Plus movies data set. That Mark Mothersbaugh, who is in Devo, his name. If you are a Rugrats fan, you will probably see his name scrolling through the credits quite a few times. Also Futurama, he does the music for both of those shows. So he was in that movie because it's a movie about the other F word, father, for punk rockers and other rock stars who are taking on their most important real life role. I think that I clipped that from the description. Their role as fathers. So one of the other cool things about this is the Aquabat Super Show. And actually, we're gonna see this in the viz. There we go. The Aquabat Super Show is super campy. If you have never seen it, I believe all the episodes are available online through one of those sites whose names I can't remember. The same one that has like MST3K on it. Aquabat Super Show, you can see like there's guys in spandex in this image on the left. Apparently some of the highest rated out of the 3 shows that Devo the band has actually been in, which I find really, really amusing given the camp factor. But you know, that is IMDb ratings for you. So let's see how that affected the leaderboard. So James still got some high points and just enough to inch out Coral by 2 points so far. So good job, James. All right. Speaking of dads, one of DJ HETUG's favorite TV dads, you might have seen this in the intro music. That's Dr. Jason Seaver from Growing Pains. I used to watch Growing Pains on repeat every single day after school. So which of the following Growing Pains stars was in one of IMDb's lowest rated comedy series, i.e. a series you probably don't want to binge? We've got Alan Thicke, that's Jason, Joanna Kearns, Maggie, Kirk Cameron, Mike, Tracy Gold, Carol, Jeremy Miller, Ben, Ashley Johnson, Chrissy, and for those of you who might remember this, Leonardo DiCaprio, who played Luke. And while we wait for this show or this question to continue, why, yes, I'm somehow shocked and surprised and in awe of the fact that almost everyone chose Kirk Cameron, because that is the correct answer. So yeah, that's all I have there. But I do want to throw in one other slight DJ Tug reference. So, or DJ HE Tug reference. In some of our opening playlists of the past, we have often played a band called the Smugglers out of Vancouver, BC. They are one of my favorite bands. And they have a song in honor of Alan Thicke. It's probably not really in honor of him, but it's an amazing song. They do name drop all of the characters that matter, at least all of the families that matter, or for family members that matter. They do not mention Chrissy or Luke. I view them as the cousin Olivers of Growing Pains, and I am completely okay with that exclusion. So, this data came from the Binge TV Show Finder by Sam Pretty. Of course, it is, defaults to showing very high rated shows, but I was trying to find out where Growing Pains would be on this list, and somehow I started at the bottom of the list, and of course saw Kirk, and I'm like, it can't be Kirk. It can't be Kirk. It was Kirk. So there we go. All right, so let's see what happened to our scores from that. So James got that one right. So that will keep him near the top of the leaderboard. But Jay Shea is catching up with Coral. So see what happens next. All right. Speaking of the worst, oh, actually, before we get into that, we've got a commercial break. Do not press any buttons on your remote. Up next, after our game show, is Andrew Drinkwater's buttoning down parameters. Look at that. I totally forgot I put a commercial in here.
Nice.
All right. So our last question was about worst TV shows. So which popular TV show, which was set partially in high school or college, we got to bring in that education reference because we are HETUG. So which popular TV show has one of the worst finale ratings relative to the rest of the show? So our potential answers are The Big Bang Theory, Dawson's Creek, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, or Veronica Mars. Also, guys, sorry I haven't been putting links in the chat properly. We'll get them all in the chat later or on the HETUG event page, probably the event page.
I should have
Or
been
you can
doing
just,
it for you because
it's okay, you're playing.
I'm playing, but I'm losing. So I should
There
have
are
been doing that.
there are no losers here. We're all learning random TV trivia.
That's so true.
So the answer was Veronica Mars. So I'm gonna say, like, I don't know how much I buy this because Veronica Mars kind of had two finales, right? Like there was a season that ended and then there was nothing for a few years and they did like a mini rebooty thing. So I don't know if that counts or not, but this is what came up on the Viz. And the Viz is in question. Actually, it's two Vizes. Bo McCready, put together two different Vizes on the worst TV show finales and the best TV show finales. So Veronica Mars was on the worst list. Again, I think there's a gap between seasons 3 and 4. But man, look at that dip. And then the other shows that were listed had really high finale ratings. And keep your eyes on this Golden Girls reference because we'll come back to that in a second. But in the meantime, let's go look at our leaderboard. C is for Cookie. I'm gonna guess that is David Ogden. Did really well on that one. And that score has now put C is for Cookie in second place behind James. James is holding on to that lead. How is that a trick question, Lisa? All right, next up, because I did mention Golden Girls. I love the Golden Girls. You guys saw or DJ HETUG loves the Golden Girls. I don't know how to keep my alter ego separate from me. It had one of the top rated TV series finales with respect to the rest of the episode ratings. So which Golden Girl or girls, could be multiple, you just have to answer one correct. Which Golden Girl or girls guest starred on King of the Hill, where Mrs. Peggy Hill, amongst other jobs, taught at Tom Landry Middle School? So the potential answers, there are only 4 Golden Girls. So like it's got to be one of the 4 or multiple of the 4. So we got B. Arthur, Dorothy, Estelle Getty, Sophia, Rue McClanahan. Oh my God, I've forgotten Rue McClanahan's character's name. Blanche. I was like, Blair, wait a second. I'm not in Facts of Life land right now. Whew. And Betty White, Rose. Those are your four potential answers. Man,
Oh, well, it's better than forgetting Betty White, I guess.
I know. I mean, Betty White is my favorite. In fact, well, you'll see both the one that I forgot. Sorry, Blanche. And Rose, both Reuben McClanahan and Betty White were guest stars in on King of the Hill. And CCC Tug co-lead Sam Homier did a viz on the best of King of the Hill. And I wanted to point this out for a couple of reasons. So A, this is just really cool. Like I love the fence and the grass and the ants and all that. But one of the slight challenges with the Data Plus TV data set is that it is massive. And we're talking like multiple gigs massive. And so some decisions did have to be made about removing some data. And unfortunately, that meant some guest star roles did get cut from the full list. Only the top X number build roles were included. And so while Rue McClanahan was in an episode with a few guest stars, and so she shows up in this data set, Betty White, who's in multiple episodes, was in multiple episodes with many guest stars. And so her name gets dropped out of the data set for those two episodes that she was in. So just keep that in mind. It did trip me up when I was building my Happy Days viz because I was like, I know that Arrested Development had both Scott Baio and Henry Winkler on an episode, but again, one or both of them were so low on the list that they didn't show up in the results. So keep that in mind. One of the fun things about playing with data is you gotta sometimes editorial decisions are made in data that impact what you can do with it. So let's look at our leaderboard. Oh, C is for Cookie and James E. both got that, but James E. still in the lead. And Dan Stanish bumped into fifth place with the fastest response there. All right, and this is our very last question. I didn't forget Betty White, and this question is about Betty White. As you may have seen in the last planned playlist song, she was on many game shows during the 60s, 70s, and 80s. That's also where she met her husband, Alan Ludden, who co-hosted, oh man, Password? Was it Password? It was Password. My brain holds random facts. So Betty White was the queen of celebrity game show contestants. So what is the top-rated American game show on IMDb? So our answer choices are Family Feud, Jeopardy, The Price is Right, or Wheel of Fortune. And I will say that I have watched many of these, many episodes of many of these over my lifetime. Watch Family Feud every day with my aunt while I visit Texas. Used to watch Jeopardy every day, but it's on at a weird time in Texas. We watch Wheel of Fortune every night too. Price is Right. I will say that I'm not a huge fan of Drew Carey hosting. Apparently, I have thoughts about all of these. All right, the answer is Jeopardy. And on Chris Williams, who is one of the co-hosts for the Portland Tableau user group, he built out this viz about our love of game shows. And Jeopardy, you do have to hover, inched out Price is Right by just a couple of votes, something like that. It was very close. I actually had the wrong answer on my thing the first time through, and then I actually had to hover, and I was like, oh, that number's larger. Jeopardy won. So that was our last question. Let's look at this leaderboard, see where we are. Looks like James and C is for Cookie, and Dan, you guys are in the top three. I am going to screenshot this in the background and hope for the best. And if you are C is for Cookie, Vote Goat, or JJ, please get in touch with us because we have no idea who you actually are. We will be in touch on the HETUG Slack to give you information about getting your prize. So it may not be until later in the week though. So Good job. Congratulations, James. I'm assuming this is James Emery, but if it's not James Emery, you should also get in touch with us. So yeah, thank you everyone for playing. We hope that this game show, our HETUG TV Data Plus TV Trivia game show was fun. I do want to say that it is brought to you by the letter F, so don't forget that we're going to hear about that other F word, financial aid, shortly. It was also brought to you by viewers like you. We couldn't hold HETUG without you all, and we wouldn't be able to have as much fun with a different audience. So we're glad that you guys are still here, still letting us be ridiculous. And David, you are gonna get the socks. Everyone who won is getting the socks. So awesome. Thank you, everyone. And I think this is, oh, hey, look at that. We've reached the end of the presentation. So we are going to go back to our slide deck. And up next, there's this guy named Andrew, who I hear just became an adjunct professor at UBC. So congratulations, Andrew. Screen is yours.
Thank you, Roshni. And I'll post my links in the chat so you don't have to worry about that. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me back again. My name is Andrew Drinkwater. I am president and co-founder at Plaid Analytics, and as Roshni mentioned, a recently appointed adjunct professor at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. I've got an MBA and a graduate certificate in visual analytics, and I've been using Tableau since 2007. So I've learned a few things the hard way and a few things the easy way, and I hope I can help you today. At Plaid, I lead initiatives like Plaid Forecast, a web-based enrollment forecasting platform that's collaborative, accurate, fast, and easy. I tell you that because we're going to use some sample data from it today for this tips and tricks. So with that, let me put my links in the chat so you have them. The workbook for today is linked in the chat if you want to try picking it apart or following along. I will note that this is a tips and tricks session, not the full how do I build this, but I'll try and mention things where they're important. So with that, let's go. All right, I will just take over the screen share. Okay, I think you should see a purple background. If you don't, let me know, and let's get going. Okay, so I'm going to talk about buttoning down parameters today. And there's a few other pieces under the hood that I'll mention as we go. But what we often find is that there are opportunities where quick filters sometimes can cause problems for new users. So let me show you what I'm talking about. That's the good one. Ignore that for now. Okay, so here's our very, very basic dashboard. It shows change over time. I mentioned this data is from Plaid Forecast. It's all made up thanks to the genius of coding. But this data represents a common problem that new users to Tableau experience. So let me show you how that works. So let's say we pick a faculty. And we're doing single select for this. And within that, we pick a program. And we can see that the Bachelor of Arts is kind of trending downward in a couple of our scenarios. A little bit more so in international than domestic. If you ever want to talk about the changes in Canadian higher ed for international study permits, let me know. But the issue that we see for a lot of new users is, let's say they're interested in a different faculty now. So we're going to change from Faculty of Arts to Faculty of Engineering. And what happens is their dashboard goes blank. Now, those of us that have been using data visualization tools for a while, not just Tableau, know that this is hierarchical data. Programs belong to academic units in this context, and we're still looking for BA, so our dashboard is blank. If we change this filter to either all or Bachelor of Engineering, our dashboard populates again. But to a new user, this can be overwhelming. They may not know why it became blank. So today I'm going to show you an alternative for how we could build out similar filtering behavior, but maybe with a better experience for our end user. Okay, so let's walk through what that looks like.
In this example, we showed change in enrollment.
Seriously? Okay, so there's a few different things that we might need to build, but we need a lot of layers to make this work the way that we want to. As mentioned, this is posted online. If you want to download it or play around, feel free. QR code there is on the right. So much like a peanut butter and jam sandwich, we need some layers. And actually, this is a little bit more like a 7-layer dip. But to do this well, we need some visualizations, obviously. We probably want them on dashboards. We need some selection worksheets. I'll walk through what that means. We need parameters and ways to select from those parameters. Um, we need a way to reset the values in those as well. And I think I want to hide the control panel too, because it's taking up a lot of visual space on my otherwise small dashboard. Okay, so I mentioned this is fictitious data from Plaid Forecast. So this is made to look, walk, talk, and act like a university, college, or polytechnic, but the data is invented, so feel free to download, it's fine. You may notice there's a lot of data in that workbook. So there's a little under 6 million rows associated with projections, and the reason for that is that we use simulation modeling. So there's 1,000 simulations for every combination of program, residency, year level, or similar, depending on your institution. Our goal is to make it so that our users can switch between any level of the hierarchy interactively without encountering a blank dashboard. So let's see what that looks like. So now we've got something that looks a little bit similar, but there's some changes. So we'll start with filters. We can see here that we're using selection worksheets for our filters instead of basic quick filters. And the reason for that, I'll draw your attention over here to the right, is so that we can populate parameter values. And I'll come back to why we might use those instead. So you remember earlier how we selected Faculty of Arts, and then we selected Bachelor of Arts. And then we selected Faculty of Engineering, and our dashboard went blank. What you can see here is that my academic unit has been populated with Bachelor of Engineering. So when I picked engineering, I went back up a level and displayed faculty level data rather than program level data. But if I want to, I can change it back to program level data. And you can see now my second parameter has been populated with the program, and my visualization has the program on it as well. What I'm ultimately striving for here is that no matter what level the user chooses from, Tableau will reset to whatever they're clicking on with the right visualization displayed, with the right level of detail, and making it essentially impossible for them to inadvertently click something that results in a blank dashboard. So with that, let me show you some of how I did this. So I mentioned there's a few tricks of the trade. We're making use of selection worksheets, parameters, parameter actions, calculated fields, sheet swapping, dynamic zone visibility. I'll cover some of them today, but I'm acknowledging that I have 10 minutes left. I may not get into all the details. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we want to get rid of the filters. The quick filters in this instance cause some of our challenges because they're hierarchical by nature. So what we want to do is replace them with selection worksheets. And a selection worksheet allows our user to click on a particular item or hover if you choose to set it up that way, and that will set our filter instead. So to do this, we want to create a parameter, and the naming is kind of up to you, but given there's a lot of them for this, I'd suggest following a convention. And then you want a calculated field that checks if that parameter value is equal to the actual academic unit in your data. And if it is, then we want to color code it purple in this case. If it's not, then we want it to be gray. We do the same thing with shapes. And then we add a worksheet action to make all this work. So this is what an example parameter would look like. Now, for the purposes today, it's really important that even though it feels like we should have a list because the list of faculties in most institutions is relatively stable and doesn't change within your visualization especially, but we actually want it to allow all. And the reason we want it to allow all is that we want to make it possible for a blank value to work. You remember when I clicked back up to faculty level, how my second parameter for program went blank. It doesn't work if I have a list unless I manually populate that list with a blank value. But to me, this was easier. Okay, so once we have the parameter and the calculated field set up, we can then create a parameter action on our dashboard. And so in this parameter action, the source sheet is going to be our selection sheet where we choose our academic unit. And then the target parameter is going to be the parameter that we just created. This field is a bit chopped off, but there's a field that represents academic unit on the visualization, and that's what we want our source field to be. We don't want any aggregation here, in part because this is a single select. If you wanted a multi-select style parameter filter, you'd want to make some changes to the calculated field and allow concatenation as your aggregation. But for our purposes, we're sticking with single select. Okay, so let's see how we built that. So now let me go to my selection worksheet and I'll walk you through what those looked like. So at our top level, what we need to do is we need to put academic unit, which is part of my hierarchy for program, here. We need to put that onto rows, and that'll get us a row, one row for every one of our faculties or trades as it's relevant. That's our first step. Our second step is we want that calculated field to be on both color and shape. So let me show you what that calculated field looks like so you have a sense of it. They're pretty simple and they follow the same pattern. So this one checks if our parameter of academic unit is equal to the data value of our academic unit. If it is, it will return true. If it's not, it will return false. And then I will come back to these calculations that are on detail for set level when we get to those actions. So you can ignore those for now, but those ones will come up in a little while. We've got a similar setup for selecting the program and selecting the year level. The difference here is that we're using a filter from the previous level of our hierarchy, the higher level of our hierarchy, to pre-filter the list of potential programs they can select from. So because I've selected, it looks like science here as my academic unit, then only the 3 programs in science show currently. But if I select a different one on that other selection sheet, this list will change. Same story for year level. I picked a PhD program, so there's only 1 year level in it technically. And yes, I know PhDs really take 6 years. Just in this data, it all shows as the same year level. So that's how we create a selection worksheet. Now, let's have a look at how we implement that on the dashboard. There's a lot of dashboard actions on here, and I will come back to the logic behind them because we're not going to go through all of them live. But how we set our academic unit from that selection worksheet is the action that I just showed you in PowerPoint. So we pick the selection worksheet, we populate the relevant parameter, and then we tell it to populate based on the academic unit. We've got similar actions for program and year level. They use different selection worksheets, different parameters, and different fields, but the idea and the setup is exactly the same. We do this for each level of our hierarchy. So once we have those actions in place, then when we start clicking around on our filtering pane, we get changes. So that's the first part. So that's how we tell it which, in this case, program we care about. We've picked BSc. Now, how do we do some of this other stuff that's happening here? So you may have noticed when I go back up to faculty level, it unsets my parameter, the P2 program parameter. So let's take a look at what that is. Here is where your naming convention comes in, and it's actually really helpful. So I'll show you this on the PowerPoint in just a second. If you've got a lot of these, it's pretty useful. So UAP is my shorthand for unset academic program information. So what this is saying is if I pick something from the academic unit at my high-level selection sheet, I want to populate the program parameter, but in this case, I want to use a calculated field that is set program to blank. And blank is literally 2 quotation marks. So it's a blank string. So when I click on an academic unit, it populates the downstream P2 and P3 parameters to be blanks. That's what's happening there. So let me walk you through a couple more key concepts here. I realize my time is going to be tight. So we're going to implement some sheet swapping. The technique is not terribly different than you've probably seen before. So what happens here is we want to display different worksheets depending on the level of the hierarchy that we are displaying. You could get around this by having dynamic calculated fields too, but this was the choice that we made for this particular visualization. So this shows what we want to display depending on what level of the hierarchy we're at. So speaking of levels, there's a concept here. So I'm going to consider a 3-level hierarchy going from academic unit to program to year level. And I'm going to implement this in Tableau. So how does this work? Let's say I pick Faculty of Arts. This is my top level of aggregation. The level parameter should be set to academic unit, and the next level, or level next, should be program, so 1 level below it. If I pick BA, this is at the level of program, so the next level down is year level. If I pick 3, year level 3, this is at the level of year level, and I have nothing below this in my hierarchy. So it's NA, you can put whatever value you want, and it doesn't really change anything with this setup. Then if I click somewhere else, like say back to the top, I pick Faculty of Health Sciences, I go back to having academic unit as my level and program as next. So these ones, unlike the other parameters, can be a fixed list. So I've got 3 different levels within it for the level parameter. The level next parameter is exactly the same. We just need two different parameters to populate them. And then when we want to implement them, we're checking the level parameter to see if it's academic unit. And to set that, we have a calculated field that just has the string academic unit. So when I click on one of these, like engineering, it will set this parameter to say academic unit. And it'll set the level next to say program is the next level down. We use this as part of our sheet swapping and for dynamic zone visibility. And you can see some of that here. Okay, so I've mentioned naming conventions. Here they are. These are up to you. I found it easier when I had a workbook with multiple dashboards and dozens of parameter actions. Having a naming convention made my life a lot easier. So SAP, apologies to those that use the real system called SAP, means set academic program in this context. UAP is unset academic program, so we turn them all to blank. Set level is for the level parameter, so different levels of our hierarchy. And set level next is essentially the same thing as set level, except the only valid values for next in this context of a 3-level hierarchy are program or next. Program or year level. Okay. The other trick was once we start doing sheet swapping, Tableau has a tendency to forget about our cargo legend. It only displays it from, say, the first worksheet rather than all the worksheets. And so I found it easier to set up a worksheet that masquerades as a legend. This is what it looks like. And I've hidden all the axes and removed zero lines and grid lines, etc. Okay, so dynamic zone visibility is sort of the last mile of this. This was how to make it a little bit more user-friendly so that particular instructions would display depending on what they clicked. So let me walk you through how that part works, because I know this is a newer concept and there's some people that were curious about it. So in the last couple of minutes here, I'll walk through some of those concepts. Okay, so the filters pane overall is using a simple show hide button. So when you put a floating object on the dashboard, you have the option to add a show and hide button. That's what I did for the selection worksheets that masquerade as filters. You don't need to use it floating anymore. You can have it be directly within the grid, to each their own in terms of preference on that. I tend to be grid oriented, but not for filters that I want to float over top of a working worksheet. So that was the first part. That's not dynamic zone visibility, though you could have filters display based on dynamic zone visibility in much the same way. So let's see how we use dynamic zone visibility. And we'll go back to some of our filtering because it's a little simpler to start. So you see when I click in different places, so I click at the faculty level and then I click a particular program, you see in this yellowish color here, my notes changed. These are not worksheets. These are actually plain text boxes. So let's see how I made that happen. So if we go to the Layout tab on the left-hand side, there is a relatively new option in Tableau called Control Visibility Using Value. And here I've got a calculated field that checks if my level parameter is equal to the word program rather than the program code that I show on the screen here, equal to the word program. If it is, it will return true. And if it returns true, it will display this particular note right below the filter icon there. If I go back up to faculty level, my notes change. And so I can see here, I'm using the same technique, but I'm checking if level is academic unit rather than program. And so I'm displaying a different note here. Note that that's a lot of word note. In this case, I'm saying that it's an optional one. But when I pick from the program, then program is no longer optional. I've chosen one, or I can choose a different one, and optional then becomes year level. So this is one way that I'm using dynamic zone visibility here. There's a few other notes. You may notice the title here is highlighted in similar colors. So it's using the same techniques, using the same kind of controls. So that's what that one is. And then I promised I'd come back to the selection worksheets when they might make a little more sense. There was a few additional calculated fields. So these last four, where we're setting the level to the academic unit or to program, and we're setting program to blank or year level to blank, these are very simple calculated fields. So if we're going to set level to academic unit, we need a string of academic unit to populate our level parameter so that when the user clicks, it will send this value through to our parameter so that our parameter knows we're at academic unit level. Same story for program, except it's the word program. Setting them to blank is literally a blank string, which I found works better than using null for this, but my first guess was null. We need the blank string to work in the parameter because the parameter itself is a string, not a Boolean. So setting p program to blank is literally a blank string. And the same story for year level. In fact, they're exactly the same calculated field, and you could consolidate them if you wanted to. I just found this easier in terms of setting up the parameter actions. Okay, so that in a whirlwind covers a wide swath of using dynamic zone visibility, parameter actions, hierarchical levels with parameter actions, and creating worksheets that can masquerade for selection or for color legends, etc. So that's basically it. I thought I'd open up and see if there are any questions. And with that, I will say thank you all so much for having me. I'd be happy to connect about this in more detail if you're interested.
So I don't think you had any questions because everything you presented was pretty clear. But I think you did have a couple of pluses on the offer to go over some of the content. So go ahead and check that out. And
Will do. Thanks, everyone.
yeah. Jenny, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to introduce our next two speakers, Alison Joseph and Carl Cortright from Western Carolina University. So Alison is a senior BI analyst, and her career has spanned more than 20 years in data analysis for higher education. She has an extensive experience in dashboard development, institutional research, budget and financial analysis, institutional strategy, and survey development. And her passions include fostering an institutional culture that embraces data and developing, articulating institutional stories using data. Her personal interests include plant-based eating and nutrition, hiking, biking, camping, reading, and being an awesome mom and friend. I have to agree. So maybe the best thing ever that anyone's ever said about Alison is when Alison's around, you start to think that you love data because of her enthusiasm, and her passion for data is contagious. And where is, all right, there's my Carl. All right, so Carl is the data architect at Western Carolina, and over his career spanning multiple industries, including manufacturing, construction, and healthcare, and multiple roles like assistant controller, project manager, business analyst, and IT management, he brings a business process and user-centric approach to data architecture to facilitate organizational change through data. So believing that our work every day should help bring positive change to even a small part of the world. He is passionate about developing processes and tools that assist faculty and administrators to focus on the thing that matters most at Western Carolina, which is the success of our students. He's horrible at writing biographies about himself in the third person. It took him 2 days to write this paragraph, and he loves hiking with his plot hound and wife, gardening and landscaping, aka digging holes where his wife tells him to. He also enjoys reading. You can find him on Goodreads, and being involved in town government through the planning board and the zoning board of adjustments. Wow, you are a busy guy. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Alison and Carl to present financial aid, the other F word.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenny. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Sorry. Replace current share. Okay, we're so excited to talk with you today about financial aid and scholarship. So let's go ahead and get started. This is the report we replaced. There was a report that was circulating in our institution for many years that was just an Excel report, had a lot of problems with it. Of course, it was static. It had no record level detail, no tie to students' academic majors, demographics, or outcomes. We found some problems with the calculations. And the big issue was that it relied on software that we decided to stop licensing. And so we knew we needed to do a replacement. So we decided to use Tableau and ended up creating a product that got our campus really excited and was really a big win for our unit. So we created 2 dashboards, one for all financial aid, which includes scholarship, and then a second dashboard that really focuses on scholarship and gets a little bit deeper into scholarship. For each of these dashboards, we created 2 versions, one that's internal for the data stewards, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but we really like to create a version that goes just for the project sponsors or data stewards, where we actually expose to them record level detail. And then also a campus version that has restricted access, including people like provost council, so deans, student affairs leadership, which is where financial aid lives in our institution, department heads and program directors, because you'll see as we get into this that we provide all this data for students by academic major. So you can say, what is the average scholarship, how much dollars on average do biology students get in scholarships? MBA students, what's the average amount of loan debt they take on? So you can slice and dice all this down to the academic program level. We know admissions in our honors college like to use this data when they're talking to prospective students and parents about the cost of attendance and the indebtedness and scholarships and stuff like that, other kinds of questions they have. And then advancement uses it to talk to current and potential donors about the impact of scholarship. We'll start with the financial aid dashboard. Here what we see is an aid summary, so we can see term by term and year by year how much aid are we distributing, including total aid per year. In a given year, we're distributing almost $100 million in aid, $98.6 million in aid the last full academic year, 22-23. This screenshot was taken a few months back. You can see we do have a lot of filters, and in a second I'll talk to you about all the different kinds of filtering. Some kind of concepts around financial aid would be that financial aid comes in different kinds of types. So the big ones are loans, grants, scholarships, work study, and other. For us, over the most recent 6-year period, we saw that loan dollars distributed were down quite a bit, whereas grants and scholarships were up a little during the same time frame. Aid source is like, where does the money come from? So most of the money for our institution and probably yours comes from the federal government, but there's also institutional aid and state aid, other aid. You can see for us, federal aid has been down at the same time. Institutional aid is up a little. Aid categories are like buckets of money that combine types and sources. So for us, the 4 biggest ones are federal loans, federal grants, non-athletic scholarships, and institutional grants. And if you keep scrolling down, you can see more there. We see that federal grants for us are down quite a bit. In fact, they were down 40% during the time period that we were looking at, a 6-year time period. So this was really exciting to our institution, especially when we saw that federal grants had held steady at about $19-20 million. And so we're getting a lot less money from the federal government, but it's really students that are taking less federal loan debt, and we're still getting the same amount of grant debt, which of course is great news for our students. In terms of the filters and options, we allow people to look at annual aid, so how much aid is distributed every year, and we offer them the years 2009, 10 to 23, 24, so about 15 years or so worth of annualized aid. We also, probably the most exciting thing we did in this dashboard, in my opinion, is we look at students who graduate retrospectively, look back through their entire academic career with us, and look at all the aid that they received. So we can say graduates on average had how much dollars in loans, how much dollars in scholarships and grants. And so because you're anchoring that in their graduation year and looking backwards, we don't offer the first graduating class of data until 14-15, because prior to that, we just felt like we weren't getting a complete picture. You have to go back like 10 years before there to just make sure you're really getting all the financial aid that these students have received. People can look at a partial year, but we make them kind of opt in with a filter to that looking at a partial year, so they don't accidentally compare a prior complete years to a partial current year. Like I mentioned a minute ago, some of the kind of foundational filters or options here are the type, which means for financial aid, loans, grants, scholarships, the source, like federal, state, and institutional, aid categories like federal loans, federal grants, athletic scholarships, and non-athletic scholarships. On our scholarship dashboard, which I'll show you in a minute, we dig deeper into scholarships and break them out by types, like athletic scholarships, donor-supported endowed scholarships, donor-supported annual scholarships, and state scholarships. And we always allow people to look at specific awards, so they can look at specifically the Pell Grant or a football scholarship or the Parent Plus loan. Literally any single loan, grant, scholarship that we offer, you can see exactly how many students got it, how much money was distributed, what was the average, and so forth. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. We offer all this data at the college department and program level. And so this, we think, makes it not just that people, who are enrollment managers are interested in this, but people in academic programs and into departments are interested in this because they can see their own students, indebtedness, scholarship awards, and so forth. And that makes it a lot more interesting to people at a kind of more local level. You also can sort apart distance and resident students because the aid profile is pretty different. Likewise, you can sort apart grad and undergrad students because they get different aid. You can look at students by class level, students by residency, whether they're in-state or out-of-state, by gender, by race, are they honors college or not, athletes or not, first gen or not, lots of different ways to look at this data. One thing that we did that was a little bit complicated for us is we offer the ability to dynamically add and remove COVID aid. During COVID, we got quite a bit of money from the federal government and a little bit of money from the state government also through a program called the Higher Education Relief Funds. HERF money is what we call that. And our campus chose to distribute a lot of that money directly in terms of student grants. We distributed money directly to students in grants. If you're thinking about money students really got, you want to include the COVID relief because they really did get that in those particular years. It was about 3 years. But if you're using this data to try and predict how much financial aid students might get in the future, let's say a new incoming student, you might want to remove COVID aid because you know that program is over and that money is not being distributed anymore. The ability to kind of dynamically add or remove a specific type of aid is complicated. And I'll give you one quick example. If you're looking at the whole university and you're saying what percentage of our students got financial aid, and say I'm a student and the only aid I got was COVID aid, and you leave COVID aid in, you count me, yes, I got COVID aid, I'm part of the group that got aid that year. But if you say exclude COVID aid, I still need to be in the denominator, I'm still a student, but now you want to remove me from the numerator because I didn't get any aid except for the kind of aid you excluded. And so this was possible for us, but a little bit complicated, and knowing up front whether there's any kind of specific aid types that you want to exclude would be helpful to you. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end when we kind of cover some questions you might want to ask on your own campus if you're thinking about doing a dashboard like this. We do offer a roster for internal folks. I'll show you an example of that, what that looks like in a minute, basically record level exportable details. And we do small cell suppression when people on our campus are getting down into categories with fewer than 5 students. We offer a view where you can see percent of aid. So basically, if you're thinking about the aid as 100% of the aid that we delivered in a year, what percent of our aid came from loans, for example, used to be close to 64%. Now it's about 51%, grants and scholarships, for example. Also by source, so you can see, for example, that about 10% of the money that we used to distribute came from the institution directly. Now it's close to 14%. So this just helps people think about what percent of aid we're distributing comes from what source or from what type. This is probably the most powerful and interesting view. It's just a table. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the filters here and zoom in on a little bit to show you a little bit more detail here. Here you can see we're looking at a given year, the 2022-23 year. You can see data by terms. We've got fall, spring, summer, and we've got data by type. For fall, we've got grants, loans, scholarships, work study, other, spring, same thing, and summer. Here what you can see is the total amount of money that we distributed per term per type, the number of students that got that kind of aid, the average dollar amount of students that got that kind of aid, the percentage of students that got that kind of aid, the total population, and the average across all students. So you might notice that there's 2 kinds of averages here, average across the whole student body and average just for the students that got the aid. I'm going to go ahead and talk about work study for a second because this is probably a clear example of the difference. We distributed 173,000 and change in fall in work study. That money went to 191 unique students. On average, every student at our institution got $15 in work study money. But we know that's a pretty silly thing to report $15 on average because most students got 0 and some students got a lot more than $15. In fact, those 191 students on average got $907. So sometimes the average across the whole student body makes sense, but sometimes the average just for the people who got the aid makes more sense. We tend to think about it like this. The average for all students across the whole student body is probably meaningful when you're talking with prospective students about general aid types. If people say to you, what's the average loan debt? Or what's the average scholarship? that students get per year or over the course of their career here. You probably want to use the average for all students. That includes people who got $0 in scholarships or who took $0 in loans. If you're looking at if you're having a more nuanced conversation, if a student says to you, I know I'm going to have to take loans, what's the average dollar amount for students that have to take loans at your institution? Or if you're doing external reporting or a small aid category like work study, usually the averages for those that got aid are the much better average to use. Here you can see we do also provide annualized aid numbers, the percent of students with aid. So about 91% of our population got some kind of financial aid in the 22-23 year, and students on average across the board, our whole institution got about $7,500 in financial aid. We offer this data annually and by semester, by type, which is what you see here, grants, loans, scholarships, and also by source, federal, state, institutional. And also by category, those are the kind of combo type buckets. And we also allow people to turn on individual awards so they literally can see every single award that we distributed, every scholarship, every grant, every loan. And for every single one of them, it'll tell you how much money did we distribute, how many people got it, and what are the averages and so forth. Here we've got total population across our whole student body, but if I filtered this down and said, just show me the College of Engineering, it would say 1,000 students, and then it might say 10% of your 1,000 students got a scholarship or something like that. If I said, just show me women, now it's only showing me, I don't know, 6,600 students or however many women are in our institution, or just show me first generation students or something like that. So if you filter it, it's changing the size of the population and it's changing the percent of the students that received aid. So this is an incredibly flexible view. It answers almost every question people have, but it is a little bit complicated. You have to be kind of a little savvy when you're using data to be able to navigate this view properly. Again, we're suppressing small cells just to protect students' financial aid data. We move from one of our most complicated views to the absolute simplest, which is our default rates. Default rates mean after graduation, what percent of your students default on loans that they have taken. This data comes from a federal source. This is the only view on our whole dashboard where there's no record level detail. So I can't tell you which students defaulted. I just know what percentage and I can compare it to a national average. This data comes from the FAFSA. I'm not going to belabor this except to just say that the FAFSA is really complicated, and I want to plug the idea that if you're going to get into this kind of thing, that having a really strong relationship with your financial aid and scholarship offices will really serve you well, because this stuff is just terribly complicated, and it really helped us when we worked with them. This is talking about the average cost of attendance. This is an example of some kind of real complexity here where they're looking at average expected family contribution and average expected family contribution where we've capped that number at our cost of attendance. So if that all sounds like gobbledygook to you, I would just say if you're going to do some reporting on this and you're trying to do it on your own without the financial aid office and their input, you're probably going to put up some bad visits that give people some confusing data. Also average gross need and average unmet need. Here we're looking at what percent of our students have some unmet need. This is a number that sometimes is asked for in grant applications and stuff like that. We were definitely thinking about the kinds of questions that the financial aid office gets asked. And when people are trying to do grant applications or assessment reporting and stuff like that, the kinds of questions that we sometimes ask. This shows the relative percentage of students with what kinds of unmet needs. So some students have less than $500 in unmet needs. Some of our students have more than $15,000 in unmet needs. So understanding the magnitude of unmet need could be useful. This is a simple but powerful view around Pell recipients. So Pell is an indication of high financial need, students that have a lot of financial need. How many of our students are getting Pell? How much Pell money are we distributing? What percent of our undergrads get Pell? And how is that changing over time? What's the average Pell award that people are getting? This is where we're going to flip over and start talking about students that have graduated and how much aid did those students get throughout their entire career here. So when you see these years, these are the graduation years. So here's the 2022-23 year. We distributed $96.5 million in aid to students that graduated in 2022-23. That's kind of interesting in the aggregate, but what's a lot more interesting is on average, by students on average. So here what we can see is the average aid for all students that graduated in the most recent year. We distributed $30,600 in aid. That's $16,000 and change in loan aid, $10,000 in grant aid, where we are including the COVID relief, and $4,300 in scholarship aid. Here, if you hover over one of these bars, you'll see the tooltip, which says we graduated 3,153 students. We distributed $96.5 million in aid for an average of $30,600, $50.8 million in loan aid for an average of $16,000. But you'll recall that there's two ways to do averages. One way is the average for all graduates, which is what I just showed. But the other way is just the average for those that got that kind of aid. So here's what we're looking at now. If I'm a student who took a loan, on average, I took $30,800 in loans. $16,000 if you average across our whole student body, including lots of people who took zero in loans. $30,800 if you average for just the students that got a loan. Likewise for scholarships, if I got a scholarship, I got an average of $9,000 in scholarships. Across our whole student body, $4,300 in scholarships average. Just those students that got scholarships, $9,000. Here's the tooltip, same number of graduates, right? 3,153 graduates, same amount of total debt or total aid, same amount of debt. $50.8 million in loans. But here we can see it saying how many students took a loan. 1,651 out of the 3,153 for an average of $30,800 per student. 52% of our students graduated with loan debt and the remainder did not. Speaking of, when we started pulling this together, that was very surprising to people. Gosh, that's a lot of students that graduated with no loan debt. And that's not what we hear when we hear the national conversations about how everyone who's graduating from college is like this crushing loan debt. So here we have is this view that says what percent of our students graduated with that certain kind of aid? What percent of students got a grant or a loan or a scholarship while they were here? So here we're doing percent of aid, undergraduate students, and we can see that we reached this high water mark in 2018-19 where about 2/3 of our students had graduated with loan debt. But then every year that number started being reduced. There's a few reasons for that. One of them is a state level program called the NC Promise program, where the state is doing some subsidies for students. We've done a big capital campaign where we're investing more scholarship money for students. And also students are a lot more savvy about borrowing. Students are a lot more debt averse than they used to be and do not take out money that they don't need. So anyway, we're seeing this big shift. In fact, people were so excited about this particular data that they put it on a billboard, which is the first time that's ever happened to us. And our new standard for whether we've successfully produced a really great report is, will they put it on a billboard for us? This is what a roster looks like. This is a super simple view. It's literally just a table and it's got a little export to Excel button. This is why we like this, though. We do this almost every dashboard we build. End users, no, sorry, let me say that again. Data stewards, the people that we're working with, that we're partnering with to build a dashboard, they like to be able to see the data, the raw data. They want to put their hands on the data. This has been a great tool for us to create a lot of transparency around the data set that we've built, really engender trust with that group. And then also it's been a tremendous tool for us for validation. So whenever you're doing a project like this, invariably someone's going to say something like, well, you show you have 300 people and we show we have 305 people. And what are the 5 people that are different? And so this is our way to really easily say, filter, 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 here's your 300. You tell me who your 305 are. We can go dig into those specific records and try and figure out what's going on there. But there is absolute transparency about the data that we've built. Also, because we're building, this is an example where we're pulling data out of Banner, that's financial aid data. We're joining it to student majors and to student demographics and so forth. Now this becomes their data source. So from now on, when those departments get like financial aid and scholarship, get questions, and we don't have a bit of viz already built for them, the likelihood is that they'll turn to our data to try and answer that question. And so it's the same data set that most questions are getting answered by, and a lot less likely to get differing results, answers. We do offer 3 particular rosters in this dashboard, one for the current aid year distribution, one for FAFSA, because there's a lot of FAFSA applications and all different kinds of data on FAFSAs, and one for students that have graduated with all their retrospective aid. This is the last view I'm going to show in the financial aid dashboard, and then I'll show a little bit on scholarship. This is a summary type. We call it at a glance. Here what we see is aid categories: total aid, scholarship aid, grant aid, loan aid, and institutional aid. Just kind of big buckets of money that people might be asking about. Well, how much money did students get in institutional aid or in loan aid? There's also different populations here: total students, undergrad students, grad students, and honor students, because honor students kind of are special in terms of some of the financial aid they get, for example, like scholarships or grants. So here at every intersection, like for example, the intersection of undergrads with loans, you'll see three numbers: how much total money got distributed to those students, the average amount per student, and the percent of students that got that money. So there's a lot of data right on this one view. You'll see there's almost no filters. If you've got a question about, well, what did women get? What did first gen students get? I don't know, stuff like that. You have to dig deeper into the dashboard. The only real filtering you're getting here is you can look by college, you can look by department, or you can look by program. And this thing does exactly what Andrew just showed, that if you pick the wrong unit, it'll go blank on you. So I'm going to try and institute some of his concepts for this particular dashboard. We did that on purpose in terms of only filtering for college department program, because our hope is that if you're a dean, department head, or program director, and you're getting ready to head to an open house, an event with prospective students, going out to an admissions event, meeting with they're meeting with prospective donors, they're meeting with a reporter, they're meeting with someone from the legislature, they can just take a photograph or print out a PDF of this one page. And then most of the questions that they'll be able to answer just right on the fly with that one page, and not worry that they accidentally filtered things in a way that gave them results that are not what they expected. We offer the same thing for graduates, students that have graduated, same kinds of categories, same kinds of populations, same kinds of numbers. How much money did we distribute? How much did students get on average for their whole career? And what percent of students got that money? Flipping over to scholarships, we have the same kind of summary at a glance on the scholarship side. The populations here are total, undergrad, grad, honors, and athletes, because honors and athlete students both have a kind of a special relationship with scholarship. And we have annual and graduated right on the same sheet because it's just scholarship. We don't have loans or grants or anything on this, just scholarship. Same kind of three numbers. On the scholarship, I'll note that we do offer the thing, something a little different, which is we show paid and offered aid. The other dashboard, we just focus on how much money we paid. But on this dashboard, we actually show how much we offered and then how much that was paid out. The reason for that is that scholarships are used as a recruitment tool. And so if we look at the ratio of how much money we offered to how much money we paid, we can understand how successful we were at recruiting students using scholarships as a mechanism. Here are some scholarship types. This is something we defined locally. So this is something you might want to talk with your office about to try and figure out what kinds of scholarships there are. There are, for us, institutional scholarships. Outside scholarships are like the Rotary Club or the Credit Union Scholarship or something like that. Athletic scholarships, donor-supported endowed scholarships means people give us money and we pay the scholarships out of the endowment. State scholarships, donor-supported annual scholarships means we're distributing actual money directly from the donors. Student demographics helps us look at certain scholarships, types of scholarships, or individual awards, and see things like how many people got them, what's the gender, race distribution, gender and race distribution. Matric type means did they go to people who started with us as freshmen, started with us as transfers or grad students, were they honors or not, athletes or not, first gen or not, in-state or out-of-state students. So it just helps us monitor the distribution relative to demographics. We can also monitor the distribution on a map. So here we're looking at athletic scholarships, for example, and we can see how the money got distributed across the state. And the final view that I'll show you, which just gives them the ability to look at scholarship distribution by North Carolina counties or high schools or transfer colleges, something that sometimes is really a nice opportunity for us to talk with high school guidance counselors about how many of their students got scholarship money and how much. Really close to done, just a last couple little things here. We're going to talk about the data structure and a couple questions. The grain of our table is this: one record per student, per term, per major, per award. And on that award, I mean specific loans, grants, or scholarships. On the major side, what I mean by that is we don't have like a first major, second major, whatever. If our institution allows people to have 2 or 3 majors, we'll put every single one of those majors into the detail. So for example, if I got a football scholarship and I have 2 majors, it'll show me major 1 with the football scholarship, major 2 with the football scholarship. And so you have to write LODs and be careful about the duplication. You don't want to sum that data up. But it means that no matter which department, whether I'm their major A department or their major B department, I'm going to show that that's students and those dollars are counted in my department's averages. Plus, in addition to what I just said, we also add records for those who were enrolled but had no awards. And you need to do that if you're trying to do what percent of students got awards. You have to include the students that didn't get awards, so you won't be able to do a percentage. The records for all those who submitted FAFSAs, whether they enrolled or not, because our campus wanted all this reporting around FAFSAs. How many did we get and what did the expected family contribution, unmet need, and so forth look like for those students. we also did records for all those who were offered aid, regardless of whether they took aid or not, and even regardless of whether they enrolled or not. And also just data governance, we did a lot of definitions for funds and so forth, and just be aware that FAFSA has federal tax information restrictions on how this data can be used. So this is another reason why you want to be careful about using this data without being closely consulting with your financial aid office. They will be able to tell you some restrictions the federal government has about the way that we're allowed to use financial aid data. And there's some restrictions, particularly around the FAFSA data. Here's a couple questions to ask on your own campus if you're thinking about doing this kind of thing. Do you need to know the percentage of students who got awards? And if the answer is yes, you need to make sure you're inserting records for students that got no awards. Do you need to know about offered versus paid awards? You may or may not need to know this. These are the reason why Carl and I are presenting this to you is because these are a couple things that got added late for us and that were that challenged us because they kept changing the grain of the table and therefore changing a lot of our calculations and stuff. So after we had built this, they said, oh, we need to know how much was offered. And it's like, well, some students maybe got an offer but never enrolled. Some students got an offer and didn't get any payout for that particular offer or whatever. So if they want to know offered and paid, it may mean you need to insert records for students who never enrolled. And if you do that, you'll need to probably have an enrollment flag. Did those students ultimately enroll or not? So you can flip on, do you want just enrolled students or any students? And if so, you need to think about when you're anchoring that enrollment. For us, that was census. Do you need to be able to dynamically add or remove any specific types of awards, any specific awards or types of awards? And for us, this was COVID aid, but it made it complicated enough. We thought it was worth mentioning to you that if someone wants that kind of functionality, knowing that early on would be helpful to you. Do you need all FAFSA data or only FAFSA data for students that enrolled? We process thousands and thousands of FAFSA applications for students that never enroll with us, and they want to know the complete picture of how many FAFSA applications were received and processed and packaged and so forth. Do you need any kind of custom categories for us? Those were scholarship groupings. So that's a thing you could think about. And then are there any kinds of data that are not included in financial aid, but people might think they are? And if so, do you think you want to include them as supplemental data right out of the gate or wait till down the road? I'll tell you that this was one of the most embarrassing moments for us with this particular dashboard, which has been hugely successful. But right as we were presenting this to a really important group, our provost, who is a military veteran, said, does this include the GI Bill? And I said, absolutely, it includes all the kinds of financial aid data. And that was not true. The GI Bill is considered an earned benefit, not financial aid. It's the only thing I'm aware of that's like that. But if we would have known, we probably would have pulled it in supplementally and maybe put it on a different tab that said, this isn't technically financial aid, but here's also a GI Bill data, because that's an important way that some students pay their university tuition bills. And so anyway, just something to think about so you can answer those questions correctly. Here's our information. My name is Alison Joseph. This is Carl Cortright. We're glad to field any questions now, but I know we're really out of time. Or you're more than welcome to email us. We can get on a Zoom with you and show you in more detail if you're going to do a project like this.
You didn't put our billboard picture in.
It was in.
Was it? Did I miss
yeah,
it?
It was in.
I missed. Sorry.
I missed the billboard picture too.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Oh, okay.
I may not have.
Sorry.
I may have like been looking at something else. Anyway, that was amazing. That was effing amazing. How about that? Hey, I didn't say the word. It's okay. It's still TV. Thank you guys so much for this. I love the connections that you made with Andrew's presentation as well, and applying some of that, the parameters and the dynamic zone visibility and to this dashboard in a future iteration. I know you guys answered, or Carl answered a few questions already in the chat. We're gonna go ahead and close out because we know that people do need to leave. Excellent. Look at that billboard in the chat. Before we get to our final slide, I do want to say, if you were VoteGoat and you have not contacted me, Ginny, or Andrew, please contact us right now because we don't know who you are and we want to give you your prizes. So in the meantime, we want to know what you thought of today's meeting. Links are in the chat. We want to let you know that December 10th, about a month from now, 4 weeks from now, is our next meeting. We're going to meet Chris Ricciardi from Tufts. Ginny's going to give her annual Mad Libs. I'm super excited about this one. I almost did a high-pitched squeal there, but I can't whistle register just quite right. And then Joe Reynolds from Northeastern is going to talk about subscriptions, which are, I think, an underutilized part of Tableau, Tableau Server, and Tableau Cloud. And if you want to present or know someone who you think should speak at a future HETUG, go ahead and fill this out. You can, put in their information. We will get in touch with them. And then finally, there's a whole bunch of other Tableau user groups that are happening over the next few weeks. There's some industry ones like the food bank tug. You're like, wait, what's a food bank tug? It's all the folks who run food banks or run data for food banks. They have a tug, and there are industry tugs for all sorts of things. And if we have CCC tug also happening December 5th, which is one of the other university or higher ed education related tugs. There's a few others. But if there's a certain part of your business that you don't think has enough representation in the Tableau user group world, you can create your own tug. And if you have questions, reach out to me, Jenny, or Andrew, and we can point you to the location to do that. But yeah, I just put a whole bunch of links in there. The Poland tug is doing a Tableau plus TV tip battle. And yeah, it's Poland, but it's actually during lunchtime if you're on the East Coast, which is amazing. CCC tug, I'm going backwards on this list. Kevin Weed, Tableau visionary extraordinaire and really nice guy, made sure I got home safe on the last day of Tableau conference. He is going to be at CCC Tug with Lisa, Sam, and Kim. Cypress Tug is featuring Louis Yu, who is one of the folks behind Data Games Viz Night. I'm messing that up really badly. Judith Becker and Mark Reed, I think both visionaries, former or current, are going to be presenting at Data Plus Maps, including an intro to spatial analysis with Tableau. And then again, Andy Cotgreave, who is just an all-around amazing person who teaches us all how to do better dashboards. We'll be at the Food Bank Tug later this week. So thank you all for joining. We will see you again, hopefully next month. We are going to go ahead and go into breakout rooms, but before I get there, thank you to Alison and Carl and Andrew for presenting, and for Ginny for making sure I actually got questions in for the Data Plus TV trivia. And to all of you for just coming in and sharing your afternoon with us.